All right. How's everybody doing tonight? It is March 17th, 2021, St. Patrick's Day. I hope everybody is doing well. I hope everybody doesn't get too liquored up. And if you do, don't drink and drive. A lot of different ways these days to get a ride home. Uber, Lyft, taxi, have a designated driver. So don't do anything stupid, okay, on this St. Patrick's Day. Me, I think that all of you know that I am a non-drinker and have been for a long time. Even though I am Irish and my biological family, really, I'm just a couple generations removed from my ancestors living in Ireland. And my brothers and my sister have taken trips to Ireland to see where the ancestors lived, and some distant relatives still do live there. Me, I'm just not into that type of stuff, just to be honest. And so I am Irish, but I have to be honest that I don't have any plans to ever go to the country or anything, even though I know we have listeners in Ireland. I know Lynn and Sinead, probably two of the most prominent ones that come to mind. But I don't know. So I hope everybody, though, is having a nice St. Patrick's Day if you're choosing to celebrate it. Let's see who's in there. See who's in here. And let's see. Louise got in first. Hope you're well. Hope your golfing is going well. Going to talk about that, Louise. Thank you. Hello, Valerie and Dee. Fishing. How are you? Eileen. Come on, Eileen. LaFord. Valerie. It's Green Day, as my 6-year-old calls it. Yeah, it's Green Day. Hello, Karen. LaFord. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Angela. Hello, Angela. And Jasmine. And Kathy. Hello, Cherie. And who else we got here? Paula and Susan and Beauty. And okay, Charlotte. All right, everybody's getting in here. You know what I always try to remember to say as at the start of every Unfound Live Show. Please give this live show a thumbs up as you are watching tonight. It helps us with the YouTube algorithms. And I wish I could help you specifically on whatever device you're using, but I think it's kind of a little bit different on everyone. So just give it a like, give it a thumbs up, and I would appreciate it. In addition, if you are not yet a subscriber to the Unfound Podcast Channel, where you're watching the show right now, I would appreciate if you would choose to do so. And this is either whether you are watching it live right now as it happens on March 17th at 9:04 p.m. Eastern Time, or if you are watching it in a rerun. So however you are watching it, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Hello, Beauty. Eileen, decaffeinated green tea for me. I love green tea. Eileen. Satin B. Hello, Satin B. How are you? Melissa. Hey, everyone. Ann and I are here on a smaller big screen. Well, that's interesting, Melissa, on a smaller big screen. Well, I'm going to do this just for you, Melissa and Ann. I'm going to get up real close. Huh? How am I? How do I look? As maybe some of you saw, I was eating some chicken wings, homemade ones, before the show began. I made sure to wipe my mouth off. That sauce can get a little messy. But did that, flossed, didn't want to have any weird things going on during this live show regarding my face or my teeth. So kind of made them kind of quickly, but I got it done. And I made sure the oven is off and everything. So everything is safe here. Melissa says we waved just like you could see us. I did not see it, Melissa, but I'm going to wave anyway. All right. So happy St. Patrick's Day to all of you. This past weekend, somebody, maybe Louise, right there at the start, asked me about disc golf. This past weekend, I went down to Sarasota and played pretty well until like the last couple baskets. Did something really stupid on 17 and then really a flub on 18. But it's a course that usually I do okay at, and I played okay, nothing special. It was just one round, and I played okay. Not as well as I played up at Throwdown the Mountain a week and a half ago, but that's why I'm an amateur and not a pro. But I think last week when I was talking to all of you, I told you how the next few weeks were going to be filled. Next couple weekends were going to be filled with disc golf tournaments. I've actually decided to withdraw from the next two tournaments, the next 2 weekends. Variety of reasons. I need to work on my game. Even though I'm throwing well off the tee, what you would call the up shots, your approach shots. If you're familiar with ball golf, those shots like around the green, the chipping, we do that in disc golf as well. Really been not, that part of my game is probably the weakest part of my game right now. And it has cost me. It cost me up in Brooksville. It cost me this past weekend in Sarasota. And so I've decided to withdraw from those two tournaments. Of course, I get my money back, luckily, along with reservations I'd made for where I was going to stay, which is nice. And so I'm going to just work on my game and get ready for the beginning of April will be the next tournament. The first weekend, it's just one day, though, in April. I'll get ready for that. And that'll give me some time to do some other things. I need to do some work with Unfound. In addition, my sister Diana and her husband are actually here in Florida over in Leesburg. So I'm going to drive over and see them for the day on Saturday. So backed out of those two tournaments, getting ready for some other ones. April will be a very busy month anyway for disc golf. So I need to get prepared for that. Hey, D, I saw you, D. What's going on, D? Good to see you. Hello, Linda. Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in tonight. It's been crazy out here, being that this is like the spring break weeks. Traffic has been crazy. Insane crazy. Not so much. It's kind of started last weekend on Saturday when I came back from Sarasota. I got over here and the last 5 miles of my trip to my place took about 40 minutes. It was crazy. The spring breakers, people driving out here. And then on Sunday, when I went to play with the Taylor Disc Golf Club on Sunday morning, I got done around 1 o'clock, and that park is only like 10 minutes regular driving from my place. It took me 45 minutes to get home. No wrecks, nothing. Just that's how busy this area has been. Of course, I live technically in Clearwater Beach, but Clearwater Beach also technically is north of me. And it's just been crazy. There are 2 different ways to get to Clearwater Beach, that area up there, either past me or coming directly over from Clearwater. And they've just been totally crazy. And that's just something you have to live with if you live out here. It's not like this really the rest of the year, but these couple weeks, it is weird. And you just have to, chill out and say, okay, all right, it's just the way it is for a couple weeks, and then it'll be back to normal. No reason to get all crazy, but I'm sure some people were getting crazy. Hello, Vegas. What's going on, Vegas girl? Not a lot going on, D. Okay, D. Fishing says getting ready for the Masters. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, some important, I don't know if they're Masters level fishing, but yeah, some important tournaments coming up in April that I want to play well at. So, yeah, I'm going to be working on that instead of going and playing tournaments, because you don't learn anything when you're competing. And, that shouldn't be practice. The practice needs to be done before you get to the course for the tournament. So that's what I'm going to be doing from now. I'm going to go play with the club on Sunday mornings at Taylor, because I like doing that. But otherwise, it's just going to be practice for me. Vegas, not to change the subject, but there's a brand new casino opening up on the Strip in July. You should check it out if you ever come to Vegas. Well, one of these days, I hope to come back to Vegas, Vegas girl, but I don't know when that is going to be. I've not been back there since I moved from there in 2011. Probably going to wait. I can tell you this. I mean, I have no plans at all right now, but I can assure you that I'm not going to go back out there until everything is back to normal, with masks and shields and everything else. So, but that's interesting. You'll have to tell me where that new casino is opening up and what it's called, because I don't keep tabs on that, Vegas girl. Kathy, fishing, yes, the Masters next month this year is when it's supposed to be. Yeah, they just had one back in October, November, and now the regularly scheduled one for April, and I'm a big fan of watching it. I don't know if Phil Mickelson's going to play well or not. He did okay this past weekend at the Players, a tournament he traditionally does not play well at, but we'll see. Hello, Marlene. What's up? Good to see you. Moving on. I got a new telephone cord. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe I'll lift this up for a second. I'd talk. See this gold thing right there? Is that fancy or what? New microphone cord. It's the first new microphone cord that I've had since I got this microphone back in probably 2005. So I went, and the old one's right here. It's still fine, but as Cherie and some of my assistants know, once in a while, it'll just go out, and there must be at least a little bit of a short in this one. And so I decided, let's get a new one. We'll use the old one as a backup just in case something weird happens. So you're listening to through a new microphone cord. I don't know if it sounds any different or not. This one seems to be a lot thicker than the old one, which is something that I did not expect. It's shorter, but it's thicker. I don't know why. But so I did that, and I got a new phone. It's not set up yet. I've shown my phone on the show before. Here's the phone that I use. It's an LG V30 that I've had since 2017, maybe. You can see the case is all messed up and everything. It's been abused. But this is the phone on which all interviews are done for the program. I use it to do all the videos for the maps, map analysis, etc. that you have seen on this channel right here. Well, I thought it was about time to get a new one. And so I went down to the T-Mobile store on Monday. And not only did I order a new phone, which I got today, and I'm going to go maybe tomorrow to set it up, but I'll show you the new one. It's still in the box, kind of. I got an LG Velvet. What is that? Velvet? That's a line from Coming to America. What is that? Velvet? So I got this new phone. So that's kind of cool. I'm looking. So I'll go to T-Mobile store tomorrow to get that all set up. So this will be the new phone on which all Unfound interviews are done and videos and things. But I also, T-Mobile has a deal going on. First of all, I got that phone half off. There was a deal going on that. But I also got myself I got my first ever tablet. Samsung kind of came as a deal. I don't know. So that's kind of neat. This is my first tablet that I've ever had. I don't know how I'm going to use it. And we'll see how I can incorporate it into all the Unfound stuff that we do. So it's been a big week technologically. New cord, new phone, which will be set up tomorrow. I wanted to make sure I got a couple interviews and conversations done before I went to the new phone, because you never know what's going to happen. And then while I was there, the guy started talking to me about tablets and some deal I could get. And there you go. It's a Samsung. And I was able to transfer all of my apps on my phone over to this. So I have Spotify, of course, Facebook, Instagram, a chess program that I have. I like to play chess once in a while. All of that is now transferred over to the Samsung tablet. So that's some, and I got one more technological thing to show you, but let's see what everybody's saying here. Blue Beauty says you sound really good and loud, Ed. Well, good. I guess this cord is working. And hello, Twinkle. How are you? Good to see you. Good to see you. The other thing that I got, and this just shows you my disc golf obsession, that rangefinders are becoming a thing in disc golf. They're not legal in playing ball golf for tournament play, but they are legal in disc golf. So I got myself a rangefinder. Like I said, it's a week of technology. I just don't, it just kind of all came together. I don't know. But so you can look through this thing, and it shoots out a laser, beam of light or whatever, and then it bounces back, and it will tell you how far the object is away. And I think this will help me for my disc golf play, not so much off the tee, but on what we might call upshots, or what I was talking about earlier. Having a problem determining, how far the basket is away and what shot should I throw? And because it all depends on how far the basket is away. And sometimes that's hard to determine, especially if there are trees in the way. So I got this Bushnell, cheaper than I thought it was going to be. And I'll be carrying this in my bag. And so you look through this and you press this button, and it'll tell you how many feet the object is away, and it'll tell you right inside this display. So these are some of the things that have been going on here at Casa de Denzel. And maybe something else I want to show you before we get into the meat of the show is my dad sent me, let me see here. My dad sent me a package. I got it today with crackers and M&Ms and things. This is something that my mother used to do. She used to send me these what we would call care packages, but they mostly had candy and beef jerky and Slim Jims and things like that. She'd send me one, maybe one every other month or something. Well, my dad sent me one. This is the second time he's done that for me. And in it, he sent me a bunch of pictures of my mother, and I thought you might enjoy seeing some of them. So let me pick out a few and to show you. Here is one. I don't know how, maybe 3 years old or something. Here is my mother and I. Like I said, how old would I have been there? I don't know. 3. That little red vest. How you like that red vest? Is that cool or what? The little red vest. I got these pictures taken. So I'm guessing this must have been, there's no date on this, 1973, 73, 74, something like that. So that's me and my mother together. I think this was a picture of my mother from the 1960s. I think when she was a teacher, getting a picture taken from maybe a yearbook or something like that. So there's my mother. She's probably, 25, something like that. So 1965, 1966, 1967, I'm guessing somewhere in there. Once again, there are no dates on that. Now we're going back. I think this is her from high school. I think this might have been her senior high school picture. So 1958, I think. There she is. Once again, it's in black and white. So that would be, I'm thinking from the later 50s. So like I said, I don't know that maybe this is from when she went to college. I'm not sure, but it's obviously older being that it's in black and white and just looking at what she's wearing and everything. So she would have been 18, 19, 20, somewhere in there. And by the way, my mother went to Duquesne University in Pittsburgh for music. She graduated, got her master's in music as well. That's how I ended up playing the piano. So that's my mother right there. Let me pick out one more here. Here's my mother with my grandmother. That's my mother's mother, my grandma Emma. My grandma Emma died in 1997. I'm guessing this picture was taken around 1995, 96, somewhere in there. And let's see if we can get one with everybody in it. I know. There's my dad right there. Once again, this is mid 60s, I'm guessing. My dad, who's 84 now. And here we go. Here's one of me, my mom and dad together, I guess, during that same picture you just saw before with me and my mother together. So once again, I'm guessing this is 1972, 1973. So I got these pictures today. I thought you might like to see some of them. So there you go. And he sent me a bunch. I mean, just to show you the stack. It's like a crazy, it's like a crazy stack of pictures. And there are these ones right here. So he sent me a bunch of pictures that I went through very quickly before the show started and thought, hey, some of you might like to see some of them. Beauty says, handsome papa. I'll tell him, Beauty. I will tell him. Of course, my mother, if you're new to the program, just within the last couple years, my mother died November 28th, 2018. In early 2016, she'd been diagnosed with polymyositis, which is an autoimmune disease that affects your lower extremities. And it's tough. My dad did a great job of taking care of her. But, with autoimmune diseases, they're very, very touchy. You really have to watch your medication if they put you on prednisone, because a lot of the medications that they give you to make your autoimmune system, kind of calm down, you then become susceptible to a lot of viruses, etc., that your body would normally fight off. And I still believe that that's what happened to my mother. And so she died on November 28th, 2018. She had just turned 78 years old that month before October 25th. Her birthday was October 25th, 1940. So there you go. Just some things going on with me and a little personal life stuff. Melissa says, love the pictures. Thank you for sharing. You're welcome, Melissa. Yeah, he sent me those pictures out of nowhere. I didn't even know I was getting this entire package. Maybe I should have opened the box right here live. You could have seen everything that I got because he sent quite a bit of stuff. M&Ms and beef jerky and Slim Jims and those goldfish crackers, which I love. Spectacular. He did a nice job. LaFord says, nice pics, like when you share parts of your life with us. Well, you're very welcome. I do what I can. I wouldn't say I'm totally an open book or anything like that, but I do what I can. Thanks, LaFord Beauty. Thank you, Ed, for sharing. You're welcome. So those are some of the things that are going on with me right now. And I haven't even told my dad. I just got the package. I came back from throwing discs. I had to get a shower and everything. Had to eat some chicken wings. And so I haven't even told him that I got the package. I'll have to do that tomorrow. Okay. Once again, if you are watching this video, please give it a thumbs up. So it can help us with the algorithms on YouTube. And if you'd like to contribute monetarily to the show as you are watching tonight, all you have to do is hit the super chat button at the bottom. That is the gray box with the $ in it. And we, of course, would deeply appreciate that. I want to say that we've been getting a lot of contributions, a lot of new Patreon people, a couple new PayPal contributions that I cannot thank all of you enough. It really means a lot to me and my assistants. So thank you very much. So let's move into the meat of the show now that we're almost a half hour in, but that's how it usually gets started. Usually do the personal stuff first. I'm doing fantastic, by the way. I just everything is good here. Let's start here as I usually do with the Marshall poll. Nyleen Marshall, the 4-year-old that we discussed this last Friday. I want to thank Heather Grotman for making an appearance, her 3rd time on the program. So she and Anthony from crimeblogger1983.blogspot.com are now tied for having appeared on the program the most. I think in 2nd place is Caroline Lowe. She's actually been on twice. But in the discussion group, I'm going to guess that most of you are in there on Facebook. The discussion group overwhelmingly decided that Nyleen was abducted. Most, of course, likely by the guy in the purple jogging suit. Maybe it was somebody else. But that's really the only choice that we have, given what we know about the disappearance almost 40 years later. In the think tank, and if you'd like to be a member of the think tank, it's patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. And you must sign up for the $12 a month level or above. You do get a lot of other cool stuff by signing up at that level. But in the think tank, where we get much more in-depth than I do in the episodes, we do a lot more theorizing and postulating, and the people who are in there get to give their own thoughts, their own experiences that might be relevant to the disappearance. As you would guess, maybe this past Sunday, we talked a lot about parenting. What parents do when they go to a gathering. How do you manage children? Do you keep an eye on them? Do you and your significant other trade off back and forth? How do you handle that? We talked about that. We also talked about, because we do have, as you expect, many parents in the think tank. Have you ever lost one of your child for, a little bit of time, maybe at a mall, a department store, a restaurant, an amusement park? And so some of them got to talk about their experiences and, being fearful. And so we tried to use their experiences and then apply them to what we think went on that day in Clancy, Montana, when Nyleen went missing. And I think one of the points that came away from our discussion, and as you know, I am not a parent. I have an experience where I hid from my mother at a Kmart back in about 1974 and drove her nuts and crazy. And I talked about that. But one of the points that I think that came out during the discussion in the think tank is that it doesn't seem like there was a plan to have the children watched, whether it was Nyleen or any other kids there. We really don't know a lot about that. it seems, I'm not saying this is a fact, but it seems that either the kids were just on their own or they put this 12-year-old or 13-year-old in charge of all of them. We just don't know. And I wish we did. I think if we knew that, then maybe we would understand this disappearance a lot better. What was the plan? What did parents do with their kids while they were there? So that was a big part of the discussion, at least at the beginning of the think tank this past Sunday. Now, as far as what the think tank thought, 2/3 thought that she was abducted, that Nyleen was abducted, and 1/3 believed that said that she ran off, walked off. I have to admit, if you are already a Patreon member, but just at one of the lower levels, just reading the blogs that I write for all of these episodes, you then know that I decided that Nyleen walked off. And the reason I came to that conclusion is that I had to combine two things. One, what are the odds that they would all show up at this place, this picnic area, this national park, this field, whatever you want to call it, and there would be somebody there who would kidnap a child? What are the odds of that? They're very, 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 very low. Now, we know they happen, but the number of those instances that occur, and comparing that to all the get-togethers that are held all over the United States, it's a very, very, very small percentage, 0.0000 something. So I had to look at that, and I looked at why was it that these kids said they saw this guy in the purple jogging suit, but none of the adults said they saw an adult in a purple jogging suit. We also have to remember that these kids did not bring this up until some days later. Because all of that put together, then on top of a theme that we've had at Unfound, since the beginning of the year, maybe even going into last year, was searches. Why are searches unsuccessful? Why hasn't Jason Landry been found? So putting that all together, that's why I decided that somehow she ran off, hid, and people just missed her, as adults get missed during searches, and she died out there in the elements. So, but if we knew what happened, we could just solve it right now, but that's what I chose. Cherie is posting the Patreon link if you'd like to sign up. Patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. Hello, Screaming Skull Saloon. That's very cool. Marlene says, I am back. Fed Milo is wet food. Okay, Marlene. I didn't even know you went away. She says Nyleen Marshall was excellent, and Heather also. Love her blogs. Yes, Phil played well. Yeah, he did. Look at all those emojis. Marlene going for the record amount of emojis this evening. Go for it, Marlene. All right, so Nyleen Marshall. As you would expect, I'll continue to talk to Heather about that. I did send her a link to the think tank so she could view it and listen to it for herself and see what she thinks. And of course, she will continue to work on it. If she wants any help from myself, of course, I will be here. And I'm guessing that you can expect Heather to appear on the program maybe another year from now, unless something big goes on. And then, of course, we'll have her on again because I like her work. Let's move on to this. The next interview I will be doing with Dr. Telesco will be next Thursday, not next Monday, as the last couple have been on Mondays. This will be like last year when I appeared with her on a Thursday. It will be March 25th, so a week from tomorrow, and it'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern on her, what I call her YouTube channel, the Fischler College of Education and School of Criminal Justice YouTube channel, the same one that we have been on before. Of course, I think right at the beginning we were on Facebook Live, but now we are on their YouTube channel. I want to thank all of you. The last show that I did with Dr. Telesco is the most watched of those that we've done so far. So I think that's impressive. I think everyone is getting more and more and more views, more and more popular. And I want to thank all of you for making that so. And right about now, you're probably wondering, well, Ed, what is the disappearance that you and Dr. Telesco will be talking about next Thursday? Well, I'm going to tell you. But first, I'm going to read what Daniel says. Daniel, Nyleen Marshall is an outstanding case. What she told about the phone message left to her parents was new to me. Daniel, it is a case where there are always new details released. You may be right about that, Daniel. Of course, I really just found out about Nyleen's disappearance when Heather wrote about it last year. Although I consider myself to be a missing persons expert, of course, I've not heard of every disappearance case that has ever happened. That would be impossible to do. But that is kind of my perception as well. And Daniel says, I followed the case for 20 years. Wow, Daniel. Why is that? Maybe that might be interesting to the rest of us. Do you live in Montana? Is there something that drew you to her disappearance? That might be interesting for all of us to know. And I'm glad you found out some new information from my interview with Heather. Heather, once again, does nice work. Getting back to Dr. Telesco, show next Thursday, March 25th, we will be discussing the disappearance and murder of Janelle Matthews. Dr. Telesco gave, I sent her a list, and I think I can say this without being out of school. She had made a request that to send me disappearances that we've covered of children. That's not something that we've done yet. And so I did that. And of course, Janelle Matthews, even though it was a special circumstance interviewing Steve Pankey, it is still technically part of the Unfound catalog. So she sent me back a couple different choices. Which one did I think? And what I said to her was, I'm kind of surprised that you didn't pick Janelle's. And I was just being honest with her. And then that's just kind of how we decided upon that one, given that I've talked to Steve. And Janelle Matthews' case was a disappearance for, 1984 to 2019. So 35 years. So it was a disappearance for all that time. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. And of course, the facts of her disappearance are fairly straightforward. And so I'm anticipating that a good amount of that time we will be discussing Steve Pankey, what he's done over the years, my interview with him. And I will, of course, before next Thursday, listen to that episode again and review my notes as well to make sure I know, remember, what to talk about and all the important points. And I'm sure Dr. Telesco, being the former NYPD, of course, she has experience dealing with criminals or possible criminals. I think it's going to be interesting to get her side of this and hear what she thinks about Steve. And so it's going to be a very interesting discussion. It's going to certainly be unique. And I think that each of the disappearances we've discussed so far have been certainly unique in their own way. Eric Alvarado, Robin Abrams, Of course, all of them. Chelsea Cobo, of course, was the last one. So should be an interesting discussion. And we'll get to talk about the main issue continues to be with Janelle Matthews, at least the way I look at it, is that it's very much like Evelyn Hartley's disappearance. Of course, with Evelyn Hartley, she goes over to somebody's house to babysit. They come home. She's gone. It looks like there was some sort of attack or abduction in the house. But what is still unknown, and that's in the 1950s that happened, almost 70 years later, we don't know if the person broke into the house because Evelyn was there, or did the person get into the house because the person thought the house was empty and Evelyn just happened to be there. And so whoever did this thought, oh, can identify me. I have to take her with me. We just don't know. Same way with Janelle Matthews. Is this a situation where somebody was scoping out the house and thought that it was empty and they went in there and Janelle just happened to be there? Or was somebody waiting for Janelle Matthews to come home? Whether it was Steve Pankey or anybody else. That will be, I'm sure, a topic of discussion next Thursday. And Daniel says he's in Argentina. Wow. Well, welcome from Argentina, Daniel. Daniel says he saw it on as a child on Unsolved Mysteries. Deborah says, hi, love your podcast. Just watched your Steve Pankey video. Thank you, Deborah. And yes, the Screaming says the Rasmussens. Thank you for reminding me of that, Screaming. Screaming says, and the Rasmussens maybe have been two abductors. Could be. Either way, in Evelyn's or Janelle's, we just don't know. In Janelle's, it's been 37 years. We don't know. Steve Pankey's been charged. I guess he's going to go to trial. We just don't know that yet. Maybe even this year. But we just don't know. I think that it's still a significant question mark as to if Steve did do this, how did he end up on that street that night? And, how did Janelle Matthews get in his sights? I just don't know. And I will tell you, be honest, that myself and at least Cherie, she and I do differ regarding on the guilt of Steve Pankey. You should just know that. I don't think she minds me saying that, do you, Cherie? So there you go. I'm looking here. If you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm looking to see if we've gotten any questions. We only have one question from the audience tonight. In fact, being that she sent multiple questions in, I think that Jill is going to get a couple of her questions answered tonight. So why don't we do that right now, at least the first one. So Jill says her question is, how do I cope with difficult conversations? It's kind of just what I do now. I know for me, Jill, if you mean difficult conversations, for example, bringing up drug use, bringing up criminal activity, bringing up prostitution and all those types of things. I have to admit, I really don't even think about it now. Probably at one time, long time ago, I worried about it. And how do I broach this subject? How do I bring it up? Now it's just part of the discussion. Now, of course, I don't bring it up if there's nothing to talk about. For example, Robin Abrams, there's no allegation she was into drugs or anything else. So there's no reason to bring it up. There's no reason to ask about it. But in many of the disappearances, that is a topic. And criminality is another topic. And as I always try to tell the guests, The only reason we're talking about it is we're not necessarily trying to probe into your daughter's, your son's personal life, because we're the National Enquirer. I'm asking you about this because it certainly could be related to their disappearance. And you never know, in an interview situation, something that's going to ring true to somebody else who is listening. And so we have to talk about these things. I try not to beat them into the ground because I don't want to lose focus on, we're here to talk about a disappearance. We're not necessarily here to talk about addiction or rehab or anything like that. We're here to talk about a disappearance. We're only here to talk about those things, how it relates to the disappearance. And I think what you will notice is, once I ask the guest about that during an interview very early on in that first third, it doesn't come up a lot after that. It's just, I want all of you to get to know what was going on in this person's life before the disappearance happened. That's it. So I really try not to spend too much time on it. A few minutes, it just depends what the situation is. But I'd like to think that we don't talk about it any longer than we have to, even though we do have to talk about it. Other than that, I have to admit that, I can't think, Jill, to be honest with you, I don't know if it's ever happened. Now, I've had some strange conversations, as I've talked about. Of course, I'm forgetting her name right at the second. This woman who murdered the woman over in Jacksonville, who was originally from Pennsylvania. I know somebody's going to look that up. Now, that was a conversation. It's still the most bizarre conversation where I was talking to this woman's mother. And that was a difficult conversation. But now I know why. It wasn't clear to me at the time. But about 3 weeks after that, it became very clear that I got the idea that her mother knew exactly where she was and that she was on the run. Other than that, most conversations, I don't get too much flack from asking probing questions off the record in these conversations that I have with guests before they're on the program. I've never had somebody say, "How dare you ask me that? How dare you say that? How dare you this? How dare you that?" I've never had any guests say that. So I would say probably the other maybe part of that question, Jill, is maybe after the fact. After the episodes come out, I do try to keep in contact with guests who've been on the program and try to do follow-up calls with them, call them, see how they're doing, kind of go over kind of the response to the episode, give some of my thoughts, a lot of the points that came up in the think tank. I try to do that. And sometimes those conversations are, I don't say they're difficult, maybe a little awkward because I am honest with them. And I do tell them, I just want you to know that kind of the listeners and talking it over with people in the think tank who are some of the big supporters of Unfound, they take the program very seriously and take part in everything that we do. We kind of decided, unfortunately, that your son committed suicide. Now, we, of course, can be wrong. If we knew what happened, we'd just go solve it right now. But the way things were described during the interview, this is the conclusion these listeners had. Okay, so this is what people are hearing when you talk about your son's disappearance. That doesn't mean we're right. But just so you know what people are hearing, this is what they're hearing. Because I can tell you many times guests think they're saying one thing, but myself, the listeners, are hearing something else. They are going through the facts. They're not trying to shade it in any way, but they will tell me a series of facts, and they'll come to the conclusion that their daughter was murdered. But what I hear, and then when the episode comes out, the interview comes out, all of you, myself, we decide, you know what? I think that she walked off. And I'm not picking out any particular disappearance that's come or unfound. This is just an example. And I think sometimes the guests are very stunned by that. But this is very common. This is not just a situation with missing persons cases. This is in everything in life. We think that we're saying one thing and people are hearing something else. We're reacting to something one way, and everybody seeing us react think that we're reacting in a totally different way. This is very common. And in anything. So we think that we come across some way, and really we're not. We think that we're being nice, and everybody else thinks we're being arrogant. We think that we're being shy when everybody thinks we're being very in everybody's face. So it just depends. And I think that that's something that I run into in having follow-up conversations with guests, that sometimes they're surprised by how the listeners react and the conclusions that the listeners come to. But once again, nobody's necessarily correct. But it does help the guest understand how they are coming across and what they're describing to people. Even if they think they're describing one thing, the listeners are hearing something else. And I think this can be very helpful to them. I think it can be very helpful to them. So Jill, that's one of your questions answered. I will get to another one later in this show. Cherie says, Steve went to church with the Matthews. He was full aware of Janelle Matthews. Okay. Deborah, heard Steve Pankey bail at $5 million. Is that correct? I think it is. Cherie says he's a repeat offender. He has been charged and accused of many things. Accused, certainly. And he's not only some totally random guy that was picked out of the blue. I agree with all of that, Cherie. The issue is, how did he end up on that street? How did he know that Janelle was going to be home alone? How did he know? How did he know? How did he know? I don't know if anybody has any answers for that. And surely, given the distance that he lived away, there were probably a lot of criminals between Janelle's house and Steve's house. So that's the way I look at it. I'd really, love to understand a lot more about this. I also think if it was that clear cut, that Steve Pankey might have been charged a long time ago. Daniel, what do you think? Some cases there are so many different versions of an account, like Nyleen's. Why is it so? What do you think? Some cases there are so many different versions of an account, like Nyleen's. Why is it so? Well, Daniel, I'll gladly answer that. And it just comes down to the kind of disappearance. If it is one involving drugs, and what I mean by that is not necessarily the drugs caused the disappearance, but it is an addict who is around other addicts, kind of like in the Noah Davis case, where I've gotten to talk to a couple people who knew him at the time, were around him at the time, and they'll admit they can't even keep their days straight. They would go days without sleeping. One day runs into the next. And so that's one of the reasons in those types of disappearances that there are a variety of different accounts. People can't keep their days straight. They thought it was here. They thought it was there because their minds aren't right. Another issue, and I think, with Nyleen's, if you're going to ask me about that specifically, is something that I brought up, when I brought up the poll earlier. And that is, once again, I'm not a parent, but it's kind of obvious to me, hearing parents talk and reading what they typed in the think tank, is that there didn't seem to be a plan in place, at least not that we know of, to keep track of the children on that day that Nyleen disappeared. And so when nobody is keeping track, then it's going to be hard to get an accurate memory, an accurate recounting of what actually happened if nobody's in charge. And it very well could be, Daniel, that, a group of people thought somebody else, one person thought somebody else was watching the kids, and that other person thought the other person was watching the kids, and neither of them were. Very common. And Beeple says, well, times are different then. That may be, Beeples, but, the truth is, despite everything that is going on in the United States this year, 1983 was a more dangerous year than 2020 was. So things have changed, but I think maybe people have just gotten smarter, about their kids. And of course, we have technology, all sorts of ways to keep track of people and kids these days. So Daniel says they were all children. That could be part of it. I'm not saying children can't be good witnesses. Of course, it depends on the age. But it's clear that none of these children actually saw Nyleen go off with this guy. They saw her talking to this guy, allegedly, but we have to remember something that's very important. And this came up in the think tank. These kids did not come up with these stories till days later. So they could have been coached. Their parents could have said something to them. I'm not saying they were lying, but all it would take would parents would say, it's very important that you remember something about that day. It's very important. Nyleen needs to be found. It's very important. And the kids start making stuff up to please their parents. Very common, not just in disappearances, but in anything in life. So that all has to be taken into account in Nyleen's disappearance. That in that situation is why I think the accounts of that day are different. It just depends on the kind of disappearance. And then on top of everything else, Daniel, we can't forget about time. That people's recollections change over time, even if they were stone cold sober when a disappearance happened. I know just from my experience, with sports going back to high school, or Little League, Senior League, some guys will remember a certain game or a certain season or a play differently than I do. Even though we were both there, we're both totally sober. We saw it happening. We were involved. We were taking an interest in everything else. And still our recollections may be a little bit different. This is everything that you run into. And it's tough. It's tough, Daniel. So these are some different reasons that you asking me about different versions. This is why that happens. And I even brought that up. The movie Rashomon by Kurosawa, it's a Japanese movie, is a good example of that. A story told from different points of view. It's Roshamon or something like that. Charlotte says, how many children were there? I have no idea. I don't think Heather knows either. Don't know. And there are no stories back at the time that say so either. So Beauty says, over time, people tend to forget. It's just part of getting older. That could be certainly, Beauty. Just depends on the circumstances. Was it something that sticks out? I will, on one hand, once again, from my experience, I don't remember every game that I've ever played in baseball going back to high school, but I do remember the big ones. I do remember, a lot of the big wins, and I remember some of the big losses. Everything else kind of just blends in. And it's just, so you usually remember the high points and low points of your life. Then everything else kind of just slips away. That's, I think. Daniel says, what leads me to the letters, I once again read a long time ago that what the letters have is information. It's mostly lift from a couple of articles. Yeah, Daniel, I have to admit that I don't know if anybody really believes those letters are true. Until all letters in its complete length are displayed, we will never know if they're legitimate info withheld from the public or is it just luck. Well, Daniel, I think we have to remember this. If those letters had any information that was really, really good information, then her disappearance would have been solved. So I'm guessing that even if we haven't seen all of them, what else we would see, I don't know, would really help us at all. If it doesn't help the police, the FBI, and everybody else, I don't know how it's going to help us. What I know is just from the tone and the contents of the letters, I totally dismiss them as being, totally some kook. Yeah, Marlene, regarding Nyleen's mother. Yeah. It was a very sad story, especially what happened to her mom. Yeah. So there you go. So I hope that answers your question, Daniel. Let's move on to this. Speaking of Patreon and speaking of Think Tank members, for those premium members, once again at the $12 a month level and above, and I would suggest you consider it. I know $12 a month is nothing to sneeze at, but anybody who's there, who is signed up, seems to stay there because they enjoy it so much, get a lot out of it. And I think you get more at that level than you get in any other true crime program out there that has Patreon. We try to give everybody on Patreon, a lot of things to read and a lot of things to see. But for those members at the premium level, Unfound on the Ground, the next one is going to be March 29th. That is a Monday, 8:45 p.m. As usual, you'll be getting an email, and it will be done through Zoom. And this time around, the topic will be why people go missing. So we've been talking a lot about research, geography, mapping. Now, I'm going to get into a little more of the psychology side of it. Why do people go missing? What happens? What are the circumstances? That will be the next discussion, not this coming Monday, but the Monday after. So be looking for that in your email for all of you, once again, who are premium Patreon members at the $12 a month level and above. Let's move on to this. I'm going to be doing another Unfound Now tomorrow, probably tomorrow morning. And I'll be doing, it'll not just be me speaking into the camera, but this is a disappearance that lends itself to at least a little map analysis showing you what happened. And I'm just going to tell you right now what it's going to be. Like I said, I'm going to film it tomorrow morning, and it'll probably be out in the afternoon, although I do have a phone call to do tomorrow afternoon and trivia tomorrow night. Going to be covering the disappearance of Kirsten Bruggeman, Bruggemann. She disappeared from Indianapolis, Indiana, in the early morning of January 2nd of this year, 2021. So this is a disappearance that is about 2.5 months old. She was out with friends. There's not a ton of information out there, but that's going to be part of the discussion that I do for this Unfound Now. She was out with friends. She went to coincidentally an Irish pub, and she left her friends. She said she's taking off. I think some of them said that they thought she was going next door to go bowling at like 12:20 a.m. But she ended up walking past this bowling alley place. It was closed, and she continued walking, I guess, would it kind of be south or southeast. They have her on video walking into the parking lot of this YMCA headed east. And that is the last anybody has ever seen of her. And it's been 2.5 months. It's not necessarily in a bad part of town. In fact, the area right near this kind of a little bit of residential area. And also, kind of the weird thing is the Indianapolis Metro Police Department is like a half block away from this YMCA where she was last caught on video. So that is the Unfound Now that I will be doing tomorrow morning. It'll be a combination of me speaking to the camera like this and doing a map supplement. I think all of you are now used to that, where I use my laptop and Google Maps to show you the location and the route somebody took, whether driving or riding or whatever. So be looking for another Unfound Now. We're about due The last one I did was back in February. Leah Scheibel from Las Vegas was the last one. And I'm trying to do one a month. So it was about due. Took a look at a few different ones. My assistants gave me some suggestions. And I kind of just picked this one. There was one I was going to do. What was that one, Cherie? Was it Brenda Davis? Is that her name? But she ended up being found, unfortunately, deceased in the trunk of her car. Was that her name? I was thinking about doing that one, but she's been found and somebody's been charged with her murder. Jill's saying, I made it. Well, I've already answered one of your questions, Jill. So you will have to go back and listen to that one. Although I will be answering Melinda Davis. Thank you, Cherie, for that. Melinda Davis, found in the trunk of her car. But Jill, I am going to answer another of your questions because I really didn't get a lot of questions from the audience before tonight's show. So look for a new Unfound Now tomorrow. Next, you know that I'm a big fan of the website findjody.com. I think we ended up covering Jody's disappearance in depth last, November? Had Caroline Lowe on. Really I've been interested in Jody's disappearance for a long time. And you should know that there's a new episode out of the podcast. And I've not had a chance to listen to it yet, just so you know. But it is an interview with Jacob Wetterling's mother. And it would seem like maybe an odd one. You know, what would she have anything to do with Jody's disappearance? But I think just because Caroline Lowe, when she was in Minnesota, is when Jacob Wetterling got abducted. And of course, we now know murdered. And she got to know Patty Wetterling. And then, of course, Caroline is now, of course, very, very involved in Jody's disappearance. And so gave Patty a chance to come on to that podcast. So if you'd like to hear an interview done with Patty Wetterling and everything that, like I said, I've not listened to it yet, so I don't know all of the exact content, but I'm guessing that she does talk about what she went through and about Jacob and everything that's gone on since and what she continues to do. So if you'd like to hear that interview, I urge you to check out the Find Jody podcast. I know it's on Spotify. That's how I listen to it. But you can go to their website, findjody.com, and find it there. And I know I bring this up to Caroline once in a while, but I'll just say it right here. I would love to be on that podcast. I think they do a nice job with it. I've listened to every episode except the most recent one. And I've talked to Caroline about it, but I don't think she controls that. But I would love to go on to talk about Jody's disappearance from a theoretical point of view. Just offering up kind of what I do normally in the Patreon blog, on here, on the Unfound Nows, in the think tank, trying to compare disappearances. Okay, this is a disappearance where here's this one over here that's similar. And try to do that with Jody's disappearance and maybe even talk about it and compare it to some other disappearances that Unfound is not covered. For example, Jennifer Kessie's could be similar to Jody Huisentruits, for example. So I would love to go on there and talk about the missing persons theory and comparing Jody's disappearance to other ones out there. So maybe that'll happen one of these days. I can only hope. So on that note, if you didn't see, some remains just within the last week, 10 days, 2 weeks, some remains were found near the apartment complex where Jody lived. There's a river that runs behind it, or right next to the apartment, and somehow remains were found. Human remains were found. Now, you should know this is not the first time that's happened. A few years ago, some remains were found of a kayaker who somehow died in the river, and that person's remains were found. I'm not sure who these remains are. I don't know. Maybe there was some other boater that went missing or drowned or something. I don't know. But you should know that remains just within the last couple weeks have been found near the apartments on the riverbank by there, and they have not been identified yet. I mean, that would be crazy if they were Jody's. That would certainly be big, 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 big news and big, huge news. I don't know what to think yet. I don't even know if they discovered, is it a man? Is it a woman? How much the remains? I don't know. But if you'd like to read, once again, more about that, you should go to findjody.com for more information on that. Jill, being that you're now here, I'm going to take, even though I did not copy it, I'm going to take another one of your questions because I know that you are going for the award again in 2021 for the best question asker on the Unfound Live Show. I'm going to just take the first one you sent me. Question for the week. If there was another case like Steve Pankey's, who would you want it to be and why? You know, Jill, I really can't get into that. I don't like to, if you're talking about a situation where there is a disappearance, then the remains are found, and there is a suspect out there that has been mentioned many times over the years, but he's still walking around or she's walking around a free person. Would I, do something like that? I can't pick out a case, because I just really don't think of him that way. But if that suspect wanted to speak to me, I would speak to that suspect. However, to do an official interview, it would have to be the same situation as Steve's, where I get to ask any question I want. And at any point, if the person says, well, I don't want to answer that, then the interview's over. Those were the stipulations I had with Steve Pankey, if you don't know. That the way I, thought about it, I said, well, I really don't do these types of interviews, but I think I should. Just because I think it's my responsibility as a reporter. If somebody who is in the news wants to talk, then I should talk to the person. But given that he is a suspect, this was before he was charged, then I'm not going to allow him to kind of just tiptoe through the interview and get off easy. So I just told Steve, love to talk to you. Here's the interview outline. If you don't answer any of these if you choose to not answer just one of these questions, the interview is over. That's what the stipulation I had with Steve, and he chose to do the interview. Now, that doesn't mean he told the truth. In fact, it seems that many people don't believe he told the truth because, of course, he claims he didn't do it, and I know a lot of people think that he did do it. I can't make a determination of truth or untruth. All I can do is ask the questions, and that is the situation with guests as well. That's why I tried to ask as many probing questions as possible and try to really, really, really make sure that we understand things completely. And are there any contradictions? So, Jill, I would do it again, but it would have to be under the same stipulations. That if this person wants to do an interview, contacts me, then it's going to be, okay, great. Love to do it. Here's the questions. If you don't answer even just one of these, it's over. And I'm not airing anything. So as far as what cases, I really couldn't pick that out, Jill. I guess there are so many. And I just don't know. I'm just giving you a theoretical, I guess. But it could happen. Can't rule it out. Of course, it hasn't happened since I interviewed Steve. It's been like a year and a half. But you never know when it could happen. It could happen anytime. Screaming says, Jacob's sister got married at my old workplace. I live in Minnesota and remember Jacob's disappearance well. I was roughly the same age as him when he went missing. Wow. Screaming, Caroline, when she and I talk once in a while, it often comes up, and because she covered that since day one, that disappearance since day one, there were so many different suspects over the years, and even going to the point that one suspect's yard was dug up, and then it turns out of nowhere this guy popped up. I don't remember his name, and then he ends up being the guilty one. It just shows you that these kinds of investigations, how they can take twists and turns. Everybody thinks it's going to end, and then it continues for years and years and years. Charlotte says, I saw the podcast that you did with Lord Nartz. That was so good. Thank you, Charlotte. I enjoyed working with John on that, interviewing Jason Landry's father, Kent. And unfortunately, that is a disappearance that's still unsolved. And we're going on, over 3 months now. And they did another search within like the last 3 weeks. Nothing was found. Thank you. I'd like to work with John again. I don't know when that's going to happen. He does his thing. I do my thing. But maybe we'll make it happen later in 2021. I don't know. Carrie says, you shuffled back and forth for a while on doing the Panky interview. Carrie, that is absolutely true. And I want everybody to know that Carrie, what you were reading there, what Carrie wrote is absolutely the truth. Carrie being one of my assistants. I did talk when this all popped up. I did ask them, should I do this? The big question for me was, do you really want to give these types of people a platform? If he is a suspect and did it, should I give this person a platform to profess his innocence when everybody thinks he's guilty? And what kind of interview is it going to be? And, what stipulations, do I do an outline like I do an interview outline like I do for all of the guests otherwise who are on the program? These are a lot of questions that I had to ask myself. And in addition, Janelle Matthews, at the point that her remains were found in 2019, it's her disappearance and thus murder, and then murder, ceases to be in Unfound's demographic of the kinds of cases that we cover. We only covered disappearances. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Jill. You're very kind. Thank you for your contribution tonight in the super chat. So I also had to ask myself this question. Is this like a slippery slope? If I cover one murder, am I going to have to cover others? And I don't want Unfound to become anything but a missing persons program. So the conclusion I came to, once again, as Carrie said, going back and forth, trying to figure this all out, is that Janelle Matthews' case was a disappearance for 35 years. And had her remains not been discovered, then I guess we might have covered her disappearance eventually. Maybe we would have covered it by now. I don't know. And had we contacted somebody in her family, before 2019, they would have been on the program. So there's that. But what the kicker was for me, what was the final decider in this, is that as long as Steve Panky was willing to go by my stipulations that I already talked about a couple minutes ago, as long as he goes along with what I want to do, that I control the interview and I get to determine the questions, and if he doesn't answer them, then I get to shut it down just like that. As long as he went along with that, then I should do it. Now, it very well may be somewhere down the road where we do get into a situation with another kind of Steve Panky, and he wants to be interviewed, and this guy, though, says, no, I'm not going to answer that question. I'm not going to answer that. I don't want to say this. I don't want to say that. Then I'm just not interested. I have enough people to interview. I have enough people to talk to. As Emily and my other assistants know, we got plenty of people to talk to. I talked to a future guest today. I'm talking to a future guest tomorrow. I got enough people to talk to. So if I'm going to go a little bit outside of Unfound's demographic, then it has to be in a situation where I get to control everything. Because what you may not know, for the regular interviews, the guests who you hear on the program every Friday, they control the information. They get to determine what we talk about. They're the ones who have been injured, have been damaged. They are the ones whose lives have been changed. So that's the reason sometimes we mention names, sometimes we don't mention names. And sometimes that's why sometimes interviews are a little bit different as to how they are approached. Whereas with Steve Pankey, he wasn't going to be in control, because him being in control was a little too convenient for him and not convenient for me. So he agreed to that, and that's why it got done. So could it be done again? Yes. But yes, it was not an automatic, oh, I got to do this. But I also thought, being that even at that point I had a lot of interview experience, I'm guessing January 2019, we would have covered, about 150 disappearances at that point. We're over 200 now. I had a lot of interview experience. So I'm experienced person, interviewer. I guess I should be the guy to talk to him. Because it doesn't seem to me that other people who have a chance to talk to him are probably going to be as experienced, and especially not when it comes to true crime type of material. So that's how we did it. That's how the decision was made. And I told him, yeah, we're going to do it. And we did it, and you got to hear it. And I have not spoken to Steve on the phone since. Although we have exchanged some emails, but that's going back easily over a year. But the only time I've ever spoken to him on the phone is for that interview. Carrie, if Steve was guilty and released some helpful info for the investigation, it could have helped bring her justice. That's true. And I have no doubt that the police did listen to that interview. There is no doubt in my mind. Now, do I think that interview had anything to do with him getting charged like a year later? I don't know. It would be very easy for me to take some credit for that. I'm not going to do that because I don't know. I'm hoping that if he is guilty, one way or the other, I don't care if he's guilty or not. I just hope the right person gets charged and gets put in jail. That's how I feel about it. I don't know. I'm leaning that he didn't kill Janelle, but as we've already determined, some other people think otherwise, and that's fine. But in the end, my job is just to ask the right questions. And, if it turns out that he is the guilty party, and that something came up in the interview that kind of said, oh, well, he told us this, and then he said this, and then they could check into something, then great. This is exactly how the system's supposed to work. But I don't know that right now. If even if I knew that, I couldn't tell you, but I don't know that. There's no proof of that. It very well could be just a coincidence that I interview him in October 19, and then he's, taken into custody, charged in 2020. I don't know. Marlene says, I agree with you there. I wouldn't want your show to be anything else either. The missing persons cases are my favorite. I like your question. Why do people disappear? Why do people disappear? I often wonder about that. Marlene, that's interesting. That I like your question. Why do people disappear? I often wonder about that. Well, Marlene, you're in luck, because the Unfound Now that I'm going to film tomorrow, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. That is going to be one of the themes for that Unfound Now, and I will do my best to explain how I think about it. Carrie says, law enforcement knew about it. He would have bragged. Yeah, right. Of course. Yeah. So, okay. So a lot about Steve Pankey and Janelle Matthews tonight. And Jill, thank you for your couple of questions. This brings us to, I don't know how much I can say about this. All right. So, but this is good news. All I can say is there is very, very credible information that the missing persons whose disappearance we covered last year, this guy's actually alive and well. If this is true, this would be a first for Unfound, that we covered the disappearance of a person and that person turns up alive somewhere. For sure. Not like Cameron Remmer. There's pictures taken. We still don't know if that's Cameron or not. But this is something that seems very real. I can't go into all of the particulars on how it's all transpired and everything else. But I have it on pretty good authority that Patrick Reed, who disappeared from Houston, Texas, I don't know if he's alive now on March 17th, 2020, but he continued to live well after he disappeared and seemingly lived pretty well and might have cleaned his act up. I can't say anything more than that. I'm sorry. I think his family is still trying to get verification on this. I know how they kind of happened upon this. I'm not going to go into it because I don't think that publicly I can say. But I think that I can tell all of you that if you remember Patrick Reed, he went to live with these people. He's an older guy. And he was living with these people, and then his family went to go check on him, and they were just like, we don't know what happened to him. And allegedly he went with another guy to Florida, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe that's all ringing a bell to you now. Ringing a bell to you. Ringing a bell now. But pretty sure, 95% sure, that he left there and ended up going and living with somebody, and once again, living a pretty decent life, and just decided to never tell anybody about it. There are reasons to believe that right now that are still, they're still trying to figure out. But given the discussion that I've had with Charlotte, his sister, who was the guest for that episode, I'm leaning strongly toward the idea that he certainly did. He was not murdered, did not commit suicide or anything like. He continued to live, and he did kind of found his footing in life. And I couldn't be happier. If there are any more details that I can give you, I will do so somewhere down the road. And of course, we have an update episode coming out in April. So if I'm allowed to say more in April, I will do so. But that is something. That would be a first. That would be the first disappearance we've covered where the missing person we covered is actually for sure alive. So that's very good news. I just found out about that within the last couple days. And like I said, his family is still trying to verify some things. But it seems pretty solid to me. So Patrick Reed, if you've not listened to that episode yet, please go back and listen to it so you can understand the particulars. And I think you're going to understand why myself and probably a lot of people are a little stunned that he was still living well after his disappearance date and doing well. Once you hear the details, I think you'll see why it's a surprise, but it's a good surprise. So there you go. Patrick Reed, like I said, a disappearance we covered. I think it was over a year ago. I think it was in 2020, but early in the year. Linda says, do you ever get any questions to ask someone from law enforcement? No. I have very, very little contact with law enforcement, Linda. Probably as little as any true crime podcaster out there. Simply because I'm in the information business and they rarely want to give out any information. I got to talk to Detective Fadi Risk in TJ Murray's disappearance. I enjoyed the conversation, but here's what I can tell you. He didn't tell me anything. I did all the talking, and I don't mind. I'm here to help. But I have very, very, very little contact with law enforcement, Linda. And I think I'm the last person they would contact if they wanted a guest to be asked questions. I really believe that. It does sound strange. Sounds strange about Kirsten leaving the bar. And we're going to talk. I'm going to give it my best presentation tomorrow, Marlene. So, yes. Daniel says, like the Fandles who are rumored to be still alive. That is something I'm not familiar with, Daniel. Beauty says, while Paula Patrick is the January 24th, 2020 episode. It's just amazing how I can remember that. I knew it was over a year ago, but it was in 2020, but I thought it was over a year ago. And that certainly would January 24th, 2020 is correct. All right. So Patrick Reed, once again, if you've not listened to that episode yet, please go back and do so. Please go back and do so. Next on the agenda, on Monday, this is the same day that I went down and got the new Samsung tablet and ordered a new phone. But before that, I also went and saw my old landlord, Terry, down in Madeira Beach. I sat and talked to her for about an hour. I really like her. So I just stopped in unexpectedly. She was there. We sat on her back porch and talked. But I got together with Lisa Kassoon and her husband, Lutchman, and Lisa's sister, Donna. We get together once every few months down at a place called Foxy's in Treasure Island, which is about, 13 miles south of here. And I know this is going way back to 2017, but Lisa was the guest. That's how she and I first met. Was when I interviewed her for the disappearance of her brother, Chip Campbell, who disappeared in March of 2016. That's a disappearance that is still unsolved. You also remember that I got together with her family in 2019. It seems like yesterday. It's crazy. But Lisa's sister, Laura, is the one who made this picture. And I know if the lighting was better, you'd be able to see it a lot better. But it's a lighthouse right there. And it has this beam of light going this direction. And in that beam of light, it says Unfound. It's beautiful. She's very talented. Her name is Laura. Well, that is Lisa's sister who painted that picture, gave it to me, presented it to me at in front of her entire family at a Sweet Tomatoes restaurant here locally. That happened in June or July of 2019. And it was really, I did not expect it. All these people were eating and they have this easel set up and they are real and everybody's looking and everything. It was quite a scene. And I love Sweet Tomatoes too. So that was good. But yeah, Lisa and she and I and her husband get together once in a while for lunch. They've been become very, very good friends. Like them a lot. And you should know Lisa and her husband are also fairly good painters as well. Fairly good. They were showing me some of their paintings on their phone, pictures of them on their phones when I was with them. And I'm very impressed. I mean, really good, like of dogs and tigers, lions, things like that. So we got together. I got together with them. The last time I got together with them was when my dad was here. So that would have been back in December. Lisa did say, though, that with my long hair, I'm starting to I look like Fabio. You remember Fabio, that guy from the 1980s? He would be put on the cover of all those romance novels and everything. And I said, oh, Lisa, stop. So, yeah, I got together with them on Monday. It was a good day. I could just sit and talk to them all day, really, truthfully. All right, one more topic, and then I will talk about this Friday's episode, an interview that I did on Sunday. I want to talk a little bit about Flight 370. You have to remember that is a disappearance that we covered back during the summer. Once again, right around when we featured Chip Campbell's disappearance within a few weeks of each other. But Flight 370, Jeff Wise, who I believe is the foremost expert on Flight 370's disappearance. I had a guy contact me through Podomatic. In fact, you can see his comments, I think, if you go to Podomatic now on the Flight 370 page. And he also considers himself to be a little bit of an expert on Flight 370, and he disputes Jeff's conclusions. And what this guy, his name is Ed Anderson, Anderson. He is an American. And what he has been doing for the last few years, although he's not made an entry on his personal website since 2019, what he's tried to do is using sound waves. These, you have to remember that in the oceans, they have detectors, sound detectors, and motion detectors. In Atlantic, Pacific, the Mediterranean Sea, the Indian Ocean, everywhere. And for a lot of different reasons. Some of them are military. You know, we have military sensors out on our borders, the United States, to detect submarines from wherever, Russia, China, wherever. But there are also sensors out there to detect earthquakes. Some are there to record natural phenomenon like whales. And what this guy has done has been able to gather information from those devices in the Indian Ocean, what they were recording at the time of Flight 370's disappearance. And he has made the argument using this data that the crash site is much more north and east of where those searches were done. If you go back, look at the search map for Flight 370 that was done, when was it? 2018, 2019, somewhere in there. Very expensive, a lot of ships, a lot of time, a lot of devices, a lot of unmanned rovers going down and scanning and everything else. If you can find that anywhere, if you do a Google search, what the area that they searched. Well, the data that Ed has leads him to believe that the flight hit the water much more north and east of where they searched. So this would be closer to what we call Sumatra. And I'm not sure what to make of it. I did pass his comments along to Jeff. I talked to Jeff a little bit about it. And of course, he disputes it. And I think Jeff brought up a really good point. And I think this is something that is always good to remember about anything, not just disappearances, but anything. In Flight 370's disappearance, a lot of science has been used. We have calculations on how far the jet could fly, given its fuel load. We have the satellite pings. We have all this different information. We have radar information that came from Indonesia and Malaysia at the time. We have now this guy, Ed Anderson, who has his information. And the problem is, when you're looking at science, real science, chemistry, biology, physics, calculus, all of those things, when you study them, if you're looking at a variety of scientific points of one phenomenon, the science should converge. Should. The problem with Flight 370 is that the more people talk about the science that they are a specialist in, the more the science diverges. What I'm saying is that if the science from the satellites for Flight 370, if it is really science and it is true, then it should match up with what Ed Anderson has with his information, these sound waves, these sensors that are in the Indian Ocean. They should match up. They don't. Likewise, if we were to go by Ed Anderson's information, that it's more northeast, well, then the satellite information should say the same thing, and it doesn't. So there's a problem somewhere. I don't know where it is, but Jeff brought that up, and I think it's really spectacular, and that he has that type of insight into it. that if everybody is strictly just going by the data, then all of this stuff should converge. If all the data is true, it should converge. It doesn't. So either somebody doesn't understand the data, or there's some what we would call confirmation bias going on. And the way we would understand that in missing persons cases is that people come up with a theory first and then try to get the facts to fit the theory instead of the opposite. That happens often. Scientists have egos too. So there's still a lot of questions, a lot of experts who claim that they are right in a variety of different fields, but it all points to different conclusions. So it's tough. I personally do believe that Flight 370, if I live to be 100, I'm probably not going to make it to 100, but just saying. If I make it to 100, I think that Flight 370 will be found. I don't know how. I don't know where. I don't know why. But I think it will be. There's just, I just don't think that a plane like that is just going to vanish. And here's what I know. People are not going to give up looking for it. It may not be this generation of searchers and scientists that get it done, but it's not going to go away. It's not going to be forgotten about, just like Amelia Earhart has not been forgotten. Of course, she hasn't been found and her plane hasn't been found, but I think different time from then till now. So I just I just thought you'd want to hear about that. I had not gotten any emails concerning or messages concerning Flight 370's episode, that episode for a long time. And then out of nowhere, this guy contacts me. So if you'd like to see what he wrote, you can go to the Podomatic page for Unfound and scroll down to Flight 370. And in the comments, you'll see what he had to say. Beauty says, Ed, with your long hair now, you could be a member of Def Leppard. Oh, behave, Beauty. If only. If only. Twinkle says, I think they will find Flight 370. These things aren't easy. You have to remember something, that even with, for example, the Titanic, it sank in April of 1912. It was not found until 1986. So 74 years later, even though we know about how many people died, but a lot of people survived too. So you had survivors to talk about, what it was like on the ship and how long they had to wait. You had the Carpathia that showed up and knew the coordinates where, of course, they didn't have satellites then, but you have the stars. That's how they navigated back then. They knew where they were on the Earth when they picked all of these people up out of the water. And still, it took 74 years to find Titanic, even though the technology existed for quite a while. So we have to just remember that even though we knew where the Titanic sank, it took a long time to find it. And we have to remember, where it sank was right in that waterway, like during World War II, where ships and submarines were going through there all the time, because that's the route from the United States to England, a route that was greatly traveled during World War II. There were U-boats out there trying to sink the cargo ships. And so there were ships going through that area all the time. So it's a well-known part of the world, very accessible, and still 74 years it took to find it. So when it comes to Flight 370, yes, Flight 370 is a smaller vehicle, smaller mode of transportation, and there's a lot more mystery as to where it is. We don't know where it hit the water, unlike we knew where the Titanic sank. I think somehow, some way, it will be found. I just don't know where. I have to admit that even though Jeff Wise's theory sounds outlandish that it was hijacked and a lot of these things were faked and it was flew up into the Russia, Kurdistan or whatever area. That is probably the most unique theory. There's still no facts to dispute that. So, Linda says, I think we'll come down to who has the money to keep looking for it. That's certainly an important part of it, Linda. Certainly. The tough part about searching, if they're going to continue to search the Indian Ocean in any of that general area west of Australia or northwest of Australia, it's some of the most desolate area of the world. That Indian Ocean just down in there, just as desolate as you ever want to get on the earth. The Pacific Ocean, of course, is larger, but the Pacific has these little islands like Midway or, of course, Hawaii and all those, Fiji and all those in the south. And then as you get up toward the northern part of the Pacific, of course, Alaska is very close to Russia, the Bering Strait. I mean, that's closer. The United States is closer to Russia than we think. Whereas the Indian Ocean, you get down into that middle Indian Ocean, there is nothing out there. Between Australia and what is it? Madagascar, whatever that little island is to the east of Africa there. There's nothing. Nothing. So it's tough. It's in big waves, very tough conditions. So, all right. Let's move on to this Friday's disappearance. This disappearance is a local one. And it is the disappearance of Kyah Taylor. And you spell her first name Cieha. Yes, that is pronounced Kyah. She disappeared February 6th, 2020. So this is the newest disappearance we will have covered on Unfound. She disappeared from Plant City, Florida. Plant City is on the direct opposite side of Tampa from where I live. Takes me about an hour and a half to drive there. In fact, I did drive there. And the episode is called Cover Tracks. And the guest for this episode is Kyah's mother, Kenetha Taylor. This is an interview that was done on Sunday. Went a couple hours long. And because this is a local disappearance on March 8th, that was a Monday, I drove over there and checked out the area. And I went to the very spot where Kyah's car was found. The general facts are these. On the day of her disappearance, Kyah had picked her boyfriend up at his work. And she and he were living at his friend's house, this guy named Kevin. And they were living on a road called Cowart Road, although I think I mispronounced it in the video that I did. But allegedly, she dropped Jason off and left. She ended up talking to a friend of hers named Tiffany, and Tiffany said that Kyah was quite manic. She kept saying over, she was complaining about Jason, saying, you're not going to believe this. You wouldn't believe this if I told you. But she wouldn't say, Kyah would not say what she meant by that. And so they hung up the phone. No idea where Kyah was going or anything. But later that evening, at around 7 o'clock, Kyah's car was found on the railroad tracks right down the street from where she was living with Jason in Plant City. And I've driven it. It's not even a mile. Not only that, not only was the car on the railroad tracks, but it was kind of partially blocking traffic. And I did a video, so you'll be able to see it for yourself. I was driving while filming with my phone. I went out there and did that. The car, a Good Samaritan was the one who called it in to 911. I wouldn't say it's the busiest street. It is Plant City, not the busiest place on earth, but it's a well-traveled road. But nobody saw whoever parked the car there. But the car was running when it was found. The driver's door was open. And Kyah's phone was on the ground beside the car. Now, one of the strange parts of this is that this Good Samaritan did call 911 and a police officer did show up. But this guy never checked the registration, never checked to see who owned the car. All he did was move the car off the tracks. That's all he did, which is very, very confusing. Didn't call it in, nothing. And Kyah has been missing ever since. And to add a little bit of another mystery to this, suddenly 10 days after she went missing, her shoes appeared down the street next to a light pole that they surely were not there before. The searchers absolutely claim that the shoes were not there. And Kenitha, Kyah's mother, says, yes, those are her shoes. And she was probably wearing them on the day she disappeared. And then they were put nicely, neatly right by this light pole. So that is a disappearance once again from the Tampa area. I drove over there on March 8th, did some video that will be on this channel. Probably I'll post it tomorrow night. It will be a combination of, you will see me filming as driving, this road that goes up and then you turn left and that's where the road is with the train tracks. And I do it both ways, going east and west. And then I will also in that video do what you are more used to is a satellite view of the area using Google Maps. So there will be a supplemental map supplemental for this disappearance, because I think it will greatly help you understand what went on that day. Of course, the big question is this: who left their car? Who left their car there? Did Kyah leave it there? Did something bad happen to her? Did Jason, her boyfriend, do something to her? Did somebody else do something to her and leave her car there? Of course, that'll be up for you to decide. So once again, this Friday, the disappearance of Kyah Taylor, that's Cieha Taylor, February 6th, 2020, from Plant City, Florida. The guest is her mother, Kenitha, Canitha, a couple unique names for this episode. And the episode is called Cover Tracks. So I think that's about it. Screaming says the Cocos Islands, and that is about it. In the southern Indian Ocean. Okay, Screaming. Beauty says the case is very interesting. It'll be up to all of you as usual to determine what you think happened. So I think that's about it. Almost 2 hours. So what do we do? Once again, happy St. Patrick's Day. Sarasota tournament this past weekend, not bad, but not great. Canceled a couple upcoming tournaments for practice regions. New microphone cord, new phone and tablet that I showed you, new rangefinder that I'm going to use for disc golf. Showed you some pictures of my ma. Talked about the Nyleen Marshall poll, Dr. Telesco. Don't forget, next Thursday, not next Monday, next Thursday, so a week from tomorrow. Unfound on the Ground, March 25th, so a week and a half from now. Unfound now, look for a new one tomorrow. FindJody.com, Patrick Reed. Got together with Lisa Kassoon and her husband, Flight 370. Took some questions from Jill and a couple of you in the audience tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you all for listening. Do not forget to give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel. Tell all of your friends about this channel. And then finally, I gave a preview of this Friday's episode, The Disappearance of Kyah Taylor. That's all I got. It was a great show. Time goes so fast. And I even got to do it with some chicken wings in my tummy. It was good. And so you will hear me on Friday. Of course, you'll see me at some point tomorrow when I release the next Unfound on the Ground. But then you will hear me on Friday. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in these Wednesday nights. I think it's one of the only live shows out there. I understand that the person who does websleuths.com also does a live show. I've learned that recently, but that's about it. I enjoy it. I love getting together with all of you every Wednesday night. I really look forward to it. And so we will be continuing this forever. Good night.